Hello everyone, and to my loyal followers, welcome back. Today you're in for a treat. This episode is a bit unconventional. I found this Pentium MMX PC104 board and I'll be upgrading that Cyrix 486 build with CD-ROM, and while usually I'm working on laptops and hardware from the 90s, I will also be upgrading the machine that makes this whole hobby possible. So watch till the end, as we'll be covering a lot of ground. To maintain my retro systems, I need a bridge to the modern world. A machine to download games, create floppy disks, and burn CD images. For the last few years, it's been this, a Dell Wyse 5070 thin client. Why a thin client? I'm strictly limited to my small 80 square foot man cave. This Wyse box has served me well with its 256GB drive and Windows 11, but with its Celeron CPU and 8GB of RAM, it's started to feel sluggish. The OS just feels tired. I've been contemplating an upgrade for a while. Then, perfect timing. I was contacted by the team at Zima to review their new ZimaBoard 2. Full disclosure, they graciously offered this for review. But after reading about it, I outright told Zima I will not be using the file server OS, but rather as a Windows 11 machine to replace my Wyse client. To my surprise, they were interested even more, and soon enough, this package arrived. The ZimaBoard 2 comes in two configurations, the 832 and the highest spec 1664 that Zima sent me. It has 16GB of RAM, 64GB of storage, but share the same Intel N150 CPU. Zima included a mini DisplayPort to HDMI adapter, a white box and a corrugated cardboard box, which holds the computer unit, and an accessories box. Packaging is basic but effective and efficient. A signed welcome letter, which is a thoughtful touch. Exploring the board, it feels very solid and very satisfyingly heavy for its size. The entire enclosure acts as a heatsink. It's packed. In front there are two SATA ports. On the side, even a PCI Express 3 slot. At the rear, two 2.5 gigabits LAN port, two USB 3, a mini DisplayPort and the power socket. Inside the accessories box, they did provide a cooling fan, SATA cable, screwdrivers, a bunch of power outlet plug adapters, which allows a power adapter to be used internationally. The second box contains a 2-bay 3.5-inch hard disk drive tray, and includes a bracket for the PCI Express expansion card. It also includes a PCI Express extension ribbon. It is designed so that the CPU board is stacked on top of the drive cage. Let's get things ready to proceed putting everything together. On the right side of the CPU board, there's a tiny slot for the cooling fan cable. The bottom of the casing needs to be unscrewed in order to access the connector. Then I needed to screw the fan to the side of the unit. Next, the drive cage is fastened to the CPU with the supplied longer screws. Then goes in my SSD drive, which had to be installed in a 2.5 to 3.5 inch adapter. The PCI extension slot ribbon wraps the unit from the right side, around the bottom, and over to the left, which is then fastened in place using thumb screws. And finally, I'm connecting the hard drive power and SATA cable. Everything is made of aluminum, with a great fit and finish. If you like that bare bones industrial look, which I certainly do, this is a really cool design. It's quite small, which is great to fit on any desk. There is no power button or switch, so it will start up as soon as you plug in the power cable. It comes pre-installed with Zima OS, a complete and powerful system for all your file server needs. But I won't be reviewing the OS today, as there are already plenty of reviews out there covering that. Without wasting any time, I'm going to install Windows 11 on the external SSD, as the onboard storage is of eMMC type, which is basically a soldered SD card. Besides being slow, it has a low endurance with limited write erase cycles. With only two USB ports, I have to add a USB hub in order to be able to attach a mouse, keyboard, and the Windows installation thumb drive simultaneously. Getting into the BIOS is fairly standard. Press the delete key during boot up, and there you have way more parameters that I could ever need and care, but you can tweak to your heart's content. In order to boot from the external or USB drive, you need to go to the boot section of the BIOS to select the device. Windows installation is fairly straightforward, although it did not detect the chipset and network interface, so I had to go to the Intel website to download the Intel i226V drivers. It's outright more responsive and overall more pleasant to use compared to the Wise client. With this setup, downloading titles from GOG, extracting the original DOS files and transferring them to floppy disks or burning them to CD is now effortless. What stands out is its design to run 24/7, resulting in exceptional stability. I've been using it for a week without a single reboot or hang. It's performed reliably throughout. The unit costs around $350, and the coupon code RetroBeacon15 knocks another $15 off. So is it worth it? Most people seem to agree, but it's important not to get carried away by the hype. I would have liked to see more USB ports, Bluetooth support for a keyboard and mouse, built-in Wi-Fi and audio output. At this price, there are plenty of alternatives, laptops, NUC-style PCs or refurbished desktops with better specs. But the ZimaBoard 2 still has a unique charm. The choice is yours. Now let's get to part 2 of this episode. After the 486 build, several of you kept asking the same question in the comments. What about a Pentium? Honestly, I didn't think I'd find one within a reasonable budget. Industrial PC 104 Pentium boards are rare, but here we are. This is the Kontron MOPS686, a tiny Pentium MMX PC 104 board. If you missed the full 486 build episode, I highly encourage you to check it out. The link in the description below. The MOPS686 is based on a 266 MHz Pentium MMX, but downclocked to 166 MHz. It uses the Chips and Technologies 69000 graphics chip, appreciated for its DOS-era games compatibility. However, this is not a 3D accelerator. 3D performance will almost fall entirely on the CPU, which is why having that Pentium MMX matters. The board supports up to 256 MB of SDRAM via a single sodium socket, more than enough for DOS gaming. So why downclocking to 166 MHz? Simple. Heat and noise. It was common practice for industrial board manufacturers to downclock this specific CPU so that it can run fanless. For sound, I'm reusing the PC104 ISA sound card from the previous 486 build. The card uses an ESS chip, not OPL3 but ESFM, producing slightly warmer tone which grew on me. There's no hardware wavetable on the card, but it does have a header for a MIDI game port. That means you can connect an external module like a Roland SC-55 and a game controller. For MT32, the card supports only UART or dumb mode rather than the intelligent mode, required by certain games like King's Quest IV, Space Quest 3, and Wing Commander. One thing that can really slow down a build like this is figuring out unlabeled connectors. Fortunately, I was able to find the documentation online. Everything is accounted for: CRT output, serial, parallel, 2 USB ports, and a flat foil 26-pin floppy connector. My current enclosure is too tight to accommodate a floppy drive, so this might be for another revision. The board doesn't have a PS2 mouse port, which is a disappointment. And since I didn't plan for a serial port on the backplate I made for the 486 build, which I'm reusing here, I'll be running the mouse through USB in legacy mode. USB legacy mode emulates an AT42 controller, which could introduce latency in some games. I'll keep an eye on it and address it if it becomes a problem. For storage, unfortunately, no onboard card reader like the Advantech 486. So I'm using a 44-pin IDE to dual port adapter with a small compact flash card reader. One of the things I genuinely enjoy about PC104 is the modularity. Swapping out the 486 board for this Pentium is just a matter of lifting one off and setting the other down. The Pentium MMX, even at 166 MHz, runs quite hot, and I don't know why it is left bare. I'm adding a heatsink for good measure to keep temperatures in check. It's time to shut the enclosure, put back the screws, and connect everything up before powering it on. It posts good, and there it is, standard Phoenix BIOS, not a lot of CPU tweaking options. It detected my highest capacity 64GB compact flash card though, and here I'm setting the USB port to legacy mode for mouse support in pure DOS, and it boots without any issue. Now let's talk about performance. Using SETMUL to step through CPU flags, 3D bench results show good coverage for most eras, but this board cannot go lower than 386DX33 levels. You will have to supplement with other utilities such as MoSlow. The high floor value doesn't play well with Test Drive 3, which was designed for the 286, and Wing Commander, which both run too fast. Ultima 7 runs nice, not super smooth, but very playable. Quake is the stress test. 3D without a dedicated accelerator means the Pentium MMX is doing all the work. We land at about 14.3 frames per second at 640 by 480. Not very smooth. For context, the Siemens Scenic I reviewed previously hits around 17.5 frames per second with similar hardware. Find the link to that video in the description below. There is something deeply impressive about completing a PC104 build. The format is a masterclass in engineering. However, availability and the price barrier to entry can be high. The next bottleneck is audio. A PC104 sound card is often the hardest and most expensive part of the process. But if you are willing to compromise on the ultra-compact footprint, there is a functional workaround, an ISA backplane host card. This allows you to tap into the massive ecosystem of standard ISA sound cards, from Sound Blasters to Gravis Ultrasound. There are several community projects available if you have steady hand with a soldering iron, but I've seen finished cards do pop up occasionally at reasonable prices. I have a dedicated video in the works that dives deeper into this specific solution, so stay tuned for that. If your main objective is maximizing DOS gaming performance relative to cost and physical size, the Pentium MMX laptop remains the undisputed champion. I have spent the last 2 years reviewing these machines to identify the holy grail models. Check out my full video series about these laptops linked below. If you enjoyed today's episode, please show your support by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. See you in the next one.